Panyaza Lesufi has shut Fikile Mbalula down. There has been an attempt to charge the ANC chairperson Panyaza Lesufi with bringing the party into disrepute, but apparently it has failed, according to some ANC insiders who are spilling the tea everywhere to all of the media houses. So there was a tense meeting yesterday, on Monday, at Luthuli House, where Gauteng leaders complained about how the National Party leaders had failed to defend themselves against criticisms from the DA. Apparently, senior leaders said that the meeting that was called was a waste of time, a total waste of time, because there was no case against the chairperson of Gauteng ANC, Panyaza Lesufi. So basically, you can't kill Krisani again. You can't kill Krisani again. You remember the T-shirt that Panyaza wore when he... what can we describe what he did? He bicycle kicked the Democratic Alliance into next week when he refused to go into coalition with them. So he wore that "Can't kill Krisani again" or "Don't kill Krisani again" T-shirt before he actually did a formal press conference. So if you haven't been following, let me give you an update on how we got to this particular point where Panyaza basically checkmated Fikile Mbalula. Here's the timeline. Last week, there was an interview between Sizwe Mpofu Walsh, Dr. Sizwe, I gotta say Dr. Sizwe Mpofu Walsh. That man has an Oxford University PhD. Don't disrespect what he's doing out there on the streets with that Oxford PhD. You know, sometimes you see somebody and you think you're equal, but in between you and him is an Oxford PhD doctorate. That's not just somewhere where John Steenhuisen can go, guys. Oxford, it's a serious institution. Anyway, there was an interview between Dr. Sizwe Mpofu Walsh and Panyaza Lesufi, which was published on YouTube. In this interview, Panyaza Lesufi did not seem very favorable of the GNU, and he said some things. I'll discuss them a little bit later. So this is the trigger event that led to what we're going to talk about. So in addition to this, the longer context is that Gauteng ANC has really been frustrating the DA and this narrative of grand coalition between the DA and the ANC called the GNU, right? Gauteng ANC has recently been part of the no confidence vote against the DA mayor of Tshwane, Silius Brink, who was just unceremoniously removed from Tshwane there. He's not the mayor anymore, and that made Helen Zille mad. They're still doing a lot of campaigning to try to bring him back because they're still going to have to vote for the mayor. But I think the ship has sailed. So that was something that has happened more recently than the Sizwe, a little bit less recently than the Sizwe Mpofu Walsh interview. In addition to this, earlier this year, Panyaza Lesufi outmaneuvered the DA in the coalition discussions and effectively kept them out of the Gauteng provincial executive. There was supposed to be this whole provincial national unity coalition thing, and Panyaza was like, not with the DA. I'm going to go with these other guys. And this really frustrated Helen Zille. She was supposed to send letters to Panyaza, and by the time she was typing, he was announcing that they are doing this provincial executive committee without the DA. And it's clearly 2-0 now. It's 2-0. 2 Panyaza, DA 0. Markets 0. So Panyaza has been... He's been Panyaza-ring them. Yaba Panyaza. Anyway... after the interview on SMWX, it's a great podcast on YouTube. You should watch all of the content. I've been there a few times. I recommend it. You know, the good doctor is cooking that side. Anyway, after the interview on SMWX, Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the ANC, wrote a letter to Panyaza Lesufi summoning him to a meeting with the party's top 7 at Luthuli House. It's like, I'm going to take you to the management. I'm going to take you to the Abantabatala there. This letter was sent on Sunday, 6 October, and it has leaked. It's all over the place. The letter's out there. I don't know who leaked it, whether it was Lesufi, whether it was Mbalula, you never know. But here's before we talk about the letter, let me not go ahead of myself. I'm going to read you the letter. What did Lesufi say on the SMWX podcast, right? He was asked about the GNU, and his thoughts about the ANC finding themselves in a coalition government. So Lesufi said the following: I do not think that the leadership of the ANC made a mistake. The debate is about the partners we brought. But if you are 40%, what do? You cannot govern. You have a minority government. But the experience of local government means that we're going to have to look at a lot of motions of no confidence. So I think that when the leadership took a decision, therefore, to invite all of the political parties that wanted to, and literally bar one political party, all political parties were willing to work with the ANC. I think the government of national unity was inevitable, but it was a choice that we needed to embrace. Then he went on to say, my only difference is that it's not the end. I see other people saying the government of national unity is the end. We've reached our freedom. I differ fundamentally on that. I really think it's a strategy. We need to prepare the ANC that can govern this country again, alone, and without any help from other political party. So Panyaza accepts the reality of this coalition, but he doesn't think it's valuable in terms of long-term strategy for the ANC, and he actually thinks that the ANC should be aiming to win outright, which every political entity should be aiming to do. This is what I look like without glasses. Every political entity should be aiming to do that, to govern outright by themselves. Right? You shouldn't be like playing to be second place or third place or whatever the case may be. And there are some people who view the future of governing in South Africa to be that maybe ANC and DA can run the country for 10 more years, 2 more terms after this particular term is over. So going from 2029 to 2039 under this coalition umbrella where you have, maybe you've got John Steenhuisen coming in for a little bit as leader of the DA. Then you have maybe Siviwe Horube or Dean McPherson, and then you have another leader of the ANC who takes over Ramaphosa running this coalition. That's what the markets seem to like. The markets have been embracing this. It's very popular with rugby South Africa, if you know what I mean. But Panyaza is saying he doesn't think that we've reached our freedom, and he differs with them on this particular thing. These comments were being watched by one and only Fikile Mbalula. Pela, these days is Nelson Mandela. I'll explain later to you. So he sent a letter requesting that Panyaza come and explain himself. Here's the letter, what it said. Request to meet with national officials on 7 October 2024. It's from Mbalula. I have observed with concern your public utterances with regards matters pertaining to the GNU and coalitions in local municipality following the national and provincial elections. These public utterances that you have made clearly go against the resolutions made by the National Executive Committee. You would recall that the NEC elaborately discussed the aftermath of the unfavorable electoral outcome, which henceforth was characterized as a significant and strategic setback. And mindful of the pitfalls of the various options that availed, the NEC ultimately resolved on the GNU as the most viable option. Look, before I go on, Mbalula wrote this letter. Mbalula has a way of putting words together where he's too bombastic and he doesn't always follow the sequence that we were taught in primary school, high school. Let me read that paragraph again. You'll see what I mean. You would recall that the NEC elaborately discussed the aftermath of the unfavorable electoral outcome, which henceforth was characterized as a significant and strategic setback. And that, who starts a sentence with and? Okay, fine, you did. And that, mindful of the pitfalls of the various options that availed, the NEC ultimately resolved on the GNU as the most viable option. That's Mbalula. He wrote that. That's his paragraph. That's him. Let me continue. In contrast, your public articulations seem to argue in contradiction to the NEC resolution in this regard, thereby bringing the ANC into public disrepute. Ordinarily, any organization that fails to observe the basic tenet of organization with respect to the principle of democratic centralism naturally invites such public disrepute and ridicule of its leadership. You can hear the Mbalula in there. You are accordingly requested to present an explanation to the national officials on why your public utterances should not be considered to not only in violation of the principle of democratic centralism, but that this inevitably violates the ANC constitution with the consideration that all NEC decisions are binding to all lower structures. You are therefore requested to make this presentation as outlined above tomorrow on Monday, 7 October, this was written on Sunday, remember, 2024 at Chief Albert Luthuli House, 10 a.m. at 10 m floor. Hey, summon this man to say, we're not so close, we're going to close you from this thing. Anyway, apparently this meeting went badly, and the insider has been dishing out the tea to the media. I don't know who the insider is. You know, Panyaza is very good at media. He was a media practitioner before he became education, MEC, etc., etc. You can't out-media Panyaza, right? He's one of the most prolific media people in South Africa. So this insider could be Panyaza. I don't know who the insider is. He spoke to News 24. It's leaking. It's leaking. It's a leaky situation, right? Anyway, so apparently this meeting went badly. And the insider is saying that Mbalula charged that Lesufi had violated the party's constitution. But he miscalculated, according to the insider, because Panyaza dealt with him through facts. Facts. According to the insider, Mbalula thought making this move would put him in pole position to be president. But he won't get that. This move alone means that he will be contested should he try. He was trying to charge Panyaza, but Panyaza enjoys support across the country. This has killed any chances he might have had. The insider went on to say, the question was put to Mbalula that after the Gauteng leadership was attacked by the DA and accused of forming a provincial government of unity, what did the leadership do? The source says that Mbalula was accused of trying to turn ANC branches against the Gauteng leaders, particularly Lesufi, when he allegedly claimed that Gauteng leaders were not towing the party line where government and party work were concerned. According to the source, the party's bosses' silence on the matter was also a problem. The insider said the discussion was that there had been 3 months of constant attack from the DA, from Helen Zille. She's been the one going boo, 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 every podcast, everywhere. They described the Gauteng leaders as mafias and the national leadership was mum. So this, when Panyaza went there, they went there to, to make, to fight. They didn't come there. They didn't come there to Mahatma Gandhi, this thing. They came there to Muhammad Ali, this thing. They came with the energy of no, right? Anyway, according to the source, it was at this point in Monday's meeting that the rest of the top 7 asked for the matter to be abandoned. Checkmate. The call was made. Comrades, let's leave this. We are done, said the insider, before adding that the Gauteng leaders further complained that they were being constantly undermined. This is where the president intervened and asked for comrades to calm down. He said that they've heard them and told both Lesufi and the Gauteng ANC secretary, TK Ngiza, that they should leave the meeting. The meeting fell apart. It was tense, but more than anything, the meeting exposed that Mbalula is gone, according to the source. Mbalula really, this is a big move that he tried to make here. This is a big move he tried to make to charge Panyaza at this point, at this juncture. Let me give you my thoughts. A few thoughts and commentary on this. Number one, the GNU is not universally popular in the ANC. And because Panyaza rejected it dramatically and successfully, he is now one of the most popular leaders of the ANC at the grassroots level going into the next conference. That's bottom line. That's the reality. Helen Zille was bragging. She was going everywhere. People were uncomfortable to see the markets because the markets came with the energy. They were like, you know what? We want DA in a coalition with ANC. Otherwise, the Rand will... Helen Zille then was also giving interviews saying, did you see the Rand almost... When they didn't want to, so we had to... People were not happy with that. at the grassroots level. You know, sometimes when you read media narratives and you watch panels and you see certain commentators or whatever on Newsroom or SAPC or even ENCA, you'll think that's the whole perception. But the ground is saying something totally different. People didn't necessarily embrace this. And many people complained about the ideologies, the rhetoric, the posturing of the DA, and how the DA actually campaigned saying that the ANC was not number one enemy, because they said EFF was number one enemy somehow. But then they said the ANC was the cause of all of the problems in South Africa in the last 30 years because of cadre deployment, because of crime and corruption. That's what they said. So people were like, how are we going into a coalition with these guys when they want us to fundamentally be destroyed, when we have other entities that have ideological consistency with us? So it's not universally popular on the ground. And that's one of the things that Mbalula has to be aware of. And he is the poster child of this coalition. He's one of the people who was negotiating, who drove it, who had to come and defend it. So he's not actually gaining a lot of points as a result of this. So that's the first point. Number two, the decision to go into this coalition with the DA has already been questioned by the South African Communist Party. The SG of the Communist Party, Soli Mapaila, actually went onto that same podcast with Dr. Sizwe Mpofu and also criticized it, but he didn't only criticize it there, Shem, to be fair. He was critical of it even before. Now, COSATU has been protesting the unemployment crisis, and it's only a matter of time before they switch on the GNU in the same way. If that happens, both alliance partners will be anti-GNU going into the next election, and this could really mean trouble for the party. It really could. If you you remember how Thabo Mbeki had a few groups of people against him going into an ANC conference, and it went badly for his team. Right? One of those groups was COSATU, right? And once you begin to lose certain entities, you lose COSATU, you lose Youth League in that particular framework, although Youth League now is not so relevant. But the point I'm making is already that decision has already been questioned. That's my second point. Third point, there is going to be a leadership battle between Panyaza Lesufi and Fikile Mbalula at the next conference. And most likely it will be for vice president, but also possibly for the presidency. And this is crystallizing it. Mbalula has made a move too early, I think. One way he tried to eliminate a rival in a way that didn't have a lot of gravitas. How can you try to go against somebody who is as popular as Panyaza at this particular point? Let's say you succeeded. Let's say you succeeded and then Panyaza is removed from the party. It leaves premiership, you get a different team of people into the Gauteng province, you get the DA coalition. That would be chaos for the ANC. It would be chaos at this particular point. Panyaza going to MK or whatever. Because he's still a political player. He would make a move. You would basically end the ANC at this particular point by making that kind of a move. I don't think that it was a well-strategized move, even though he was trying to, re-establish his authority. Sometimes you gotta send a WhatsApp or something. You don't do what this, summoning somebody to speak to all seven. Okay, let's continue. So there's going to be a leadership battle. I think the battle lines are being drawn right now. We can see that. That's my third point. The fourth point is that there have been calls from those who feel threatened by the Gauteng ANC and the Gauteng party leaders from the Gauteng Provincial Executive Committee to be disbanded alongside the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Executive Committee. So the argument that is being given is that both provinces performed poorly in the 2024 elections. And there's some truth to that, right? There's some truth to that. So Gauteng in 2019 was on 50.19% with 2.168 million voters. And then in 2024, they dropped to 1.3 million and 34.55%. So they effectively lost 15%. KwaZulu-Natal was sitting on 1.9 million in 2019, 54.22%. They dropped from 54.22 to 17.22%. That is a crazy drop. That is a crazy drop, 37% drop. So it's clear that there are issues. Look, there are other provinces that dropped as well, right? So Western Cape, ANC lost about 9%. They lost also in Free State. They lost about, 8%, 9%. They lost about 8% as well in Northern Cape. They kind of held their ground in Eastern Cape, in Limpopo and Northwest. But Gauteng is such a critical province. And now let's unpack whether or not this idea of disbanding KZN and Gauteng makes sense. I think that there's a strong case for the disbanding of KZN. That group of ANC leaders made a lot of mistakes. They also were fighting with the royal family. They were doing a lot of things that everyone could see that this is not going to lead to the outcomes that the ANC wants. Then you have MK emerging. Then they didn't have a good strategy for dealing with the MK threat. I think that they should be disbanded. 17% from 50 is a big slump. And I think there's a strong case for there. GP was the second worst performing province, losing 15%, which is significant, but it's not as bad as the other provinces. And the party also lost some support in 2019. It's not as bad as KZN. And the party also lost some support in 2019 in Gauteng, but it was not as significant as this election. Now, the question then becomes, I think in KZN, there is a contributing factor from the provincial leadership. I think that's true. But I don't think the same can be said of Panyaza and the provincial leadership in Gauteng. At a campaign level, now talking about campaign, not service delivery and governance, campaign. Panyaza tried. He tried, Shem, to campaign for the ANC. Nancy Spani, he was crisscrossing everywhere. He did the community protection service thing, the Amapanyaza, the Green Bombers. He tried. But the issues of the ANC nationally, I think, also manifested in the province. Unemployment is very high. People had been frustrated with load shedding. These are issues which had nothing to do with Panyaza. Also, crime is very high, right? He is trying to deal with the crime issue, but he can't deal with it alone. But he's been trying, but crime has not gone down. Panyaza, it hasn't. So some of these things are on his performance, but a lot of them are national. The other thing that we have to be aware is that Gauteng has the largest number of voters. It's the most contested province. So Eastern Cape, Limpopo, Northwest, these are solid ground for the ANC, in part because of also there are large rural populations there. And those rural populations have older voters who are still loyal to the ANC up to now. But in Gauteng, the demographic is relatively younger. The education levels are different. The economic challenges are felt in a different way, and people are exposed to more things. So they're not necessarily just going to go with the ANC. It's very contested. 23.51% of all registered voters are in Gauteng. It has 6.5 million of all of the registered voters, according to Stats SA. So it's a contested province, and if you're not doing well nationally, that will show in Gauteng more than it shows in other places. Part of the thing that has caused an underperformance of the ANC is that Ramaphoria was over in 2024. People were not persuaded by Mr. Ramaphosa himself as a leader. That's part of it. There were some mistakes made at a national level that have not been considered. The ANC campaign, with the Come Duze, that was a poor social media campaign. These are things that probably are coming out of Fikile Mbalula's side that he also has to take a responsibility for. So I don't think that the call for the disbanding of, Gauteng ANC because of the 15% drop is fair, because many people in the ANC have to point fingers at themselves, right? Including executive. You have to look up as well, not just look at Panyaza, right? So anyway, that's my fourth point. Fifth point, Panyaza is becoming enemy number one of the markets and of the Stellenbosch godfathers. The markets wanted the DA and ANC coalition in Gauteng, in KZN, nationally. They got it nationally. They got it in KwaZulu-Natal. They did not get it in Gauteng because of Panyaza. He's frustrating the markets. He's frustrating the big donors. Remember, the big donors are the people who are orchestrating some of this. If you look at how Nicky Oppenheimer and his brother contributed to IFP in May and April, they contributed 50 million rands in the last 2 months because they looked at the polling and they saw that, MK is going to govern outright KZN, and they didn't want that. So they had to pump 50 million rands into IFP. That helped IFP a little bit to prevent MK from getting the 50% that they needed to govern outright, because it would be a totally different dynamic right now if KwaZulu-Natal was under MK. And I still think that they should have actually allowed MK to form a coalition with smaller parties and go through. But that was prevented. It is what it is. But what I'm trying to put across in this particular point is that the markets wanted national, KZN, Gauteng. They didn't get that, right? And if you look at who markets are, really, you can look at who also was donating to DA, the owner of Capitec, founder of Capitec, Michel Leroux. And he's one of the big donors who was donating. You look at other entities and how they were contributing monies. Naspers, which owns Media 24. Naspers gave money to 2 political parties, ANC and Democratic Alliance. So can you see how the media houses were massive? So if you look, markets are owned by the people who own media houses. I've told you, Rupert owns ENCA, right? You know that Kuzbeka, Media 24, they own News 24. And look at who was pushing. Look at who was pushing for the DA-ANC coalition. From the time the results were announced, it was pushed like this. The rand will fall if you get MK, EFF, etc., etc. So these people are not necessarily happy with Panyaza. They don't want him. The markets are already thinking long-term, and they're beginning to see certain things. The markets want Ronald Lamula to take over from Cyril Ramaphosa. Shame, they're trying to groom Ronald. They're putting him in all of the key strategic portfolios, but I don't think he's going to make it. Why? Because the numbers are not on his side. I want to talk facts, let's talk facts. Right? Even though the President Ramaphosa is grooming Lamula, even though there's been attempts, they've put him in justice now, they've put him in international relations, serious portfolios. Look at how he performed at the conference. Out of 4,436 delegates, Lamula got 315 when he contested for deputy president. With the support of President Ramaphosa, with all of the financial muscle, with a cabinet position, with all of that PR that he was getting, 315 votes out of 4,436. That's not even 10%. 10%, less than 10% of the ANC wanted him to be deputy president. How do you come back from that? I don't think that he's got the charisma and the political talent to play the game on the street. Panyaza has that, right? Mbalula has that. I don't think that Lamula has it. And the numbers are showing that, right? So that's the first thing. The markets want him, but they're not going to get him. There have been whispers. You know, sometimes when you are doing this podcasting, etc., people will start talking to you and telling you, hey, did you know that this man is visiting Stellenbosch? So there have been whispers that Mbalula has been visiting Stellenbosch and talking to the big guys, the billionaires, and positioning himself as the next man after Ramaphosa. This is apparently why he is now the Nelson Mandela of diplomacy. Have you seen how Mbalula has shifted? Mbalula used to be the first one. Hey, you think this is thingy? Hey, wada. Hey, these are a bunch of losers. Hey, this and this. Now Mbalula is Nelson Mandela. We have to work with the neoliberal DA because we have 40%. This is Mbalula now. Hey, Mbalula has changed. Apparently, this is part of the reason, because he has a stronger case than Lamula to be the next leader of the ANC, right? He got 1,692 delegates when he contested for Secretary General. He won narrowly, but he won, right? 1,692 is much more than 315. But still, he's got a challenge because he only won by 102, right? So these are the dynamics. The markets, we know that they don't want Paul Mashatile. You can see from how News 24 has been reporting on him consistently. They've got, what is it, Mashatile unmasked, etc., etc. It's almost like the VBS that Paulie was doing. When the media houses come at you like that, unmasking you, showing spiderweb thingies, showing graphs, charts, everything, they'll discuss your sweethearts. They'll discuss everybody that once sent you a text. When you see that, you know that they don't want you. They don't want you anywhere close to this thing. So they don't want the markets don't want Paul Mashatile, right? They have taken a more critical approach on him and his family than they have on Palapala, right? Which is a scandal that is going to the Concord. The case is actually the guys who stole the money from the farm. They have a case on the 26th of November. Did you know that? Right? That case is ongoing. One of them is dead. The media is not covering that blow by blow. But Mashatile, if his security guards kick somebody, Mashatile security guards. It's got nothing to do with him. He didn't tell them to kick nobody, but yeah, you'll hear it that way. When you see that, when anybody around you does something wrong and they want to really attack you, they will say, Paul Mashatile's maid slaps somebody at a tavern. So it'll be like, Paul Mashatile's maid Nomsa slaps someone at tavern. This shows how Paul Mashatile is abusing power. Sometimes the media doesn't try hard to hide its agenda and biases, but it is what it is. So they don't want him, you can see that. And what you need to remember is that the markets plan well in advance. This is why we're seeing a lot of these dynamics playing out just after the election. Do you remember Helen Zille said that they would negotiate a coalition with the ANC? Dala, she said that long ago. I think it was late in 2019, maybe 2020. Before the pandemic, she was already saying 20%, we can work with 20%. Don't worry, we're going to go into the coalition with the ANC. The long-term planning, scenario planning was already being done. It's being done now. This is why you're beginning to see some of these things unfold. So my final comment is the road to the ANC conference for 2027 has already begun. And you can see it in these types of skirmishes. Mbalula summoning Lesufi to Luthuli House to explain to leadership, why are you criticizing GNU? Hey, it's on, guys. We'll see what happens.